video, let's think about solving for the SAT math problem. And the question is the equation right over here, x squared minus 6x plus 8, represents a parabola. If you think about in terms of parabola, it is a case when we show it into a equation, it will going to be a quadratic function. And if you think about x squared minus 6x plus 8, it actually should be y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. It has a squared term inside a equation, which means it will going to be a quadratic function. So that's why this displays a parabola. And if we think about which of the following is equivalent forms of the equation displays the x-intercept of the parabola distinctly. And there are some choices for our answers right over here, A, B, C, and D. And first of all, let's think about in terms of what it is to be x-intercept. If you just think about a basic format as you have learned in a lot of videos, x-intercept is a case when the y value is equal to 0 and the x value exists. So this is a case when the x-intercept exists. And if you think about solutions for a question before I solve for this question, main thing that we need to know is that we need to think about in terms of finding the x-intercept from the quadratic form. And here's our quadratic form, and we need to think about in terms of how we're gonna find it. And that is the first main thing that we want to think about in terms of solving for this question. If we think about in terms of how to convert x-intercept into a x-intercept form, it is a case when you need to make quadratic form into a binomial. The reason is because let's convert this into a binomial. And if we convert into binomial, it is basically we're trying to find the x values when the y values is equal to 0. So if you actually apply this, all you need to remember when it comes to solving for the x-intercept in the quadratic form, all you need to do is make this quadratic form into a binomial. And let's apply this for our quadratic form. So y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. And we can think about in terms of converting to a binomial. At first, according to a binomial theorem, there will be a two nomials, and the x and an x times x makes x squared. And then if you multiply these two terms that I'm pointing out together, we're going to get 8. And if you add it, we're going to get negative 6. So we can think about in terms of the factor of 8. For a factor of 8, let's think about 1 times 8 and then 2 times 4. And if you actually think about it, if we add those two numbers, we need to get negative 6. But if we add 1 and an 8, it will going to give us 9. And if we add 2 and a 4, it will going to give us 6. So let's think about it in another way. Even though we multiply positive together, we will going to get positive. And if we multiply negatives together, we will also going to get positive, which means negative 1 times negative 8. Negative times negative will turn to positive. And if we add it, it will going to be negative 9, which is not equal to negative 6. And if you think about the next factor, which is negative 2 times negative 4, if we multiply it clearly gives us positive 8, but if we add it, it gives us negative 6, which satisfies our function right over here. So for this term, we can input our values negative 2 to our unknown quantity, and also we can input our negative 4. So if we actually do that, I'm going to write in a different case. It will going to be x and then minus 2 times x minus 4. And that will going to be the case where we'll do y. All we did is y value are the same, but we convert this quadratic form into our binomial. And now what I need to find value is that we learned that the x-intercept value is a case when the y value is equal to 0, which means we need to input the value of the y into 0. And if you do that, we will going to get 0 is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. And let's think about the values which makes the x-intercepts. So if you think about this case right over here, if you think about beside the binomials, there's actually multiple sign, but we just don't write it. And for if you multiply these terms and if you get 0, we can think about in this way. If you call this term A and if you call this term B, if you multiply A times B is equal to 0, that means this A is equal to 0 or this B should be equal to 0. So that if you multiply together, we're going to get 0. So we can actually apply this to this one, which means when this case 0, x minus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 4 is equal to 0. And we can think about the x terms, x values, which makes this expression turn to 0. At first, x minus 2 is equal to 0. Our x value is equal to, if we add 2 to the both side, we get x is equal to 2. And here's our 1 value. Let's think about it in terms of x minus 4. X minus 4 is equal to 0, which means x value is equal to, if we add 4 to the both sides, we get x is equal to 4. 2 and 4 are the values which are the x-intercept, which means if we make kind of a quadratic formula for this, this is a case which shows our value 2 and then value of 4. So let's think about this as 0 point as y, because 0 is just numbers that came out for our output. So basically our basic format is y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. And let's look for our thing if there's actual our answer. If you look at A, let's think about the case for a D first. If you look at our D, y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. And it is clearly our answer, which is exactly same with this. So we can write our answer, that our answer for this question will going to be D. And we can actually prove it, these three things, whether it's right or not, by making it, if you look at it, it is y plus 1, y minus 8, and then y. The thing that we need to do in order to compare all of them is to convert and leave only y terms in the left side. The reason is because if there is a coefficient, the y side is hard to solve for it. So our answer for this question was D. And let's think about in terms of a quadratic functions graph of y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. So let's think about in terms of graph of y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. And let's write our function down, y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. And we can plus somewhere, we can just pick some points that are easy to graph. And at first we know the point from the y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. From our data, if we convert if the output of our function is equal to 0 for our y value, x minus 2 times x minus 4, we figure out that there are two cases. At first, there are the x-intercept, as we have proved here, which means the y value are 0, and for the x value exists. But for the x value, we found that 2 and a 4. So we can actually graph that. 1, 2, 3, 4, comma 0. The 1, 2, and then here is 2, comma 0. And according to our property of our function, whether it becomes a maximum or a minimum point, let's just prove that. And at first, we know that our original function is y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. But we have learned about this that there's actually coefficient of the x squared, which we're going to be a, I will call it. And we have learned that when the a value is positive, the graph's format will go upward. And for the second case, when the a value is equal to negative, the graph will go downward. And these are two cases, but the a value doesn't really affect when it comes to graphing a parabola, except for um, affecting its format of graph. So these are two cases, but if you think about it, the x squared coefficient in this case will going to be 1, which is positive value. And we can see that the graph will go upward, such as this case, which means, as we have learned, the upward case, the only minimum point exists, maximum point never exists. So for the minimum point of our function, we actually need to, in order to graph this function, we need to make it into a vertex form, as we have learned this. So let's graph that. But we know one thing, that before we graph it, according to our function property, this is really important function property, that the x value of our minimum value will going to be the half of our the 2x intercept, which means it will going to be half of 2 and a 4. Half of 2 and a 4, we can just find it through our average, which will going to be 4 plus 2 and divide by 2, which will going to be, this term will going to be 6 divided by 2 will going to be 3. So our minimum points x value will going to be 3. So our minimum point x value will going to be 3. But for y value, we don't have to convert this into a vertex form. The reason is because we can just input our value of 3 into our x value, find our output of our function, which will going to be our y value. The reason why we use vertex form is that is a case when we don't know a x value as well as y value. But we know a value of 3, which will go into our x value according to our function property. So we don't have to find the value. We don't have to convert into a vertex form. We can just input our values of x to our original function and find the output of our function. So if you input the value of 3, it's going to be y is equal to, instead of x value, we input the value of 3 minus 2, and then we have times, we input also value of 3 into the x value, which will going to be 3 minus 4, and then this term will going to be negative 1, and then this term will going to be positive 1, which will turn into 1 times negative 1 will turn to negative 1. That means if we input a value of x value as 3, we get an output as the y value of negative 1. So this point right over here will going to be actually a minimum point of our parabola. And if we graph it, we're going to know an approximate value of it. So if you input the value of x value as 3, which will going to be right over here, right will going to be average of these 2 points. And then we go down, which will turn to negative 1. So the graph will look something that look like this to satisfy these 3 points, and also satisfy our equation y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4. But we can think about also x squared minus 6x plus a2. And this form and this form are same but different way to show it. So we can actually input the value of 3 to this form. And if you input the value, it should give us the same number. So x squared minus 6x plus 8. Let's input the value of x value to our original function. Y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. So it gives us as output negative 1. Same with our x minus 2 times x minus 4 binomial form. So if you input the value of 3 into the x value, it will going to be 3 squared minus, instead of x value, we input the value of 3, negative, and the 6 times 3 is 18. We get positive 8. And this is 9. We have 9 minus 18 plus 8. And 9 minus 18 will turn to negative 9. And then plus 8 will turn to negative 1, which actually dissatisfies our point. So we can clearly see that x squared minus 6x plus 8 and the y is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 4 are same ways, but another way to show it, and there are different kinds of ways that we use it. For this term, we use this case to find the x-intercept, which means the y value is equal to 0 and the x value exists. And for this term, we just only find the value of y-intercept. The way to find it is that y-intercept means the x value is equal to 0 and the y value exists, which means we can just input our value of the x value, which is 0, to our original function. And then this whole thing we're going to cancel out, and we get our y-intercept as 8. So this term we use it for finding the x-intercept, and this form we use to find the y-intercept. But they're all same kind of ways to show.